Hello and welcome to the show where we discuss the Indian economy, the crisis it is in, and the way forward. One of the focus or focal points of the Finance Minister's relief package was that she's making business easy for the medium or small entities, right? But when they went to the bankers or the financial institutions, they have complained that they were given higher targets or stiff targets for disbursal, or they were told, okay, you take 50 lakh loans, but you have to repay what you owe us first and then you go about your business. Does this help the small businesses? Where do you think the Nirmala Sitharaman plan failed?
They also guaranteed the agency credit guarantee line, which provides the loans 100% guaranteed by the government. So basically what they're saying is they'll pay all the loans, all the defaults which happens afterwards. So there is a problem of moral hazard there. Not even neither the lender nor the borrower will care about the loan anyways, because they know that the government will pay afterwards. So that way the policy has failed. They should have done what UK has done. They should have provided 80% of guarantee. So there is a bit of a scope for borrowers to return the money and lenders to check on the borrowers. So that's where I think they have failed.
One problem that I think is they have redefined what it means to be a medium, small and micro enterprise and increase the limit. So you could have larger players come in and be defined as a medium enterprise. And these are the enterprises that banks like to lend to, right? Because it's much easier to operate. It's much easier to monitor one account rather than open, let's say 15 or 20 small ones. So what we could be staring at is further marginalization of micro, the smallest enterprises, the most vulnerable, at the expense of bigger players availing most of the funding. Also, this funding will only be made available to those enterprises that already have borrowings, and the limit I think stands at 20% of the existing borrowings. So enterprises that aren't levered sort of don't get.
We've also seen talks about how bigger corporates can come in and help the situation right now. They can adopt the MSMEs, give them some business. But do you think this is a viable option to go with? Soham?
There are two things attached to it. Whether it's a viable option in the short run, as we think of coming out of the crisis, in the medium run, when the economic crisis is over, then what does it leave for the existing marginal and small MSMEs? The medium run, if we have a vision of the medium run, then it's rather problematic, borrowing from what Siddharth was telling, that the concentration of capital of MSME would go into the larger section, and whatever intention that these loans were provided with, that is completely gone. And again, second part is that this particular loan that these MSMEs or even the corporate undertaking of MSMEs, whether that, like, again, the problem is not, if we think about the problem for India's economic stagnation was not coming from a sub-bottleneck. It was coming from a rather demand side crunch, and we need to ensure that even though corporate entities are coming into MSMEs, how much gainful employment and thereby how much aggregate demand these can provide. And until and unless that is being somewhere guaranteed or provided with, this whole corporate coming in might result in rather what we can see as centralization of the whole capital provided or the capital loans provided.
And also say, if for example, if TVS stays with Rani, they give them a certain rate. Will they be willing to give the same rate to a smaller organization? Or there's also the question of quality control. Will a smaller organization be able to provide the same quality controlled certified products as the bigger corporates?
First, the question is about even if the corporates take over the small firms, whether they would be willing to produce at the full capacity. Because again, as Soham has rightly pointed out, that this is a supply side problem, and unless and also there is an element of uncertainty attached to it. So unless even if the corporate takes it over, if they believe that the people are not going to buy or not going to demand, because end of the day, even if the corporate takes over, they are going to make final goods which will be demanded by the consumer. So unless there is consumer demand, so there will not be, I don't think even issuing loans to MSMEs will be beneficial for the economy.
The economic package had a lot of scope for loans rather than handouts. We have been talking about DBTs throughout this discussion and how it's important, but a large part of the help that the government wanted to provide is in form of loans. But will people take loans if there is no demand? Like, will I take a loan if I have a small business or a small kirana shop? Will I take loans if no one is coming to my shop?
There are two kinds of loans that I would want to talk about. First is the MSME loan. I mean, I think in this scenario, the government gets into a very vicious cycle. I mean, even if you credit guarantee, the banks have already faced a huge NBFC crisis, and you are in a position that you've not even repaid the 500 crore of the remaining Manrega wages. So even if the government promises, the banks don't take it at face value, especially now, because they've already been through a crisis. And especially when there is no demand, I think they have promised, backed up also, because they know that people will not be in a position to take loans because there is no demand. So without demand, the loans are in and of itself not taken, even if you credit guarantee it. And second, there are the Shishu loans, which were for the small businesses, the informal sector, 10,000 up to rupees loans. I mean, look at the kind of bureaucratic things that you have to go through when you yourself want to get a loan. To expect like a small informal worker to go to a bank and get that loan, when there's a huge red tapeism within banks, they are also not happy to give loans to such people without back security. To assume that banks will also give up loans is a big problem on the part of the government. And second, without any stimulus in demand, I mean, you can give 500 rupees to women accounts and you can give 2,000 rupees to migrants, but that's not enough to stir demand, because all of that money is going in eating food, in going home, in the basic minimum things. And MSMEs are in the production of much larger things that require a much larger stimulus for them to produce anything. So without that, these credits are nothing but a hope for people who have been able to survive till now on some money that they had. But that's also to assume these are already rich and already have the capital to go ahead and do that also. So it's not really doing anything, but on the face of it, it looks brilliant. And
they shouldn't think about the fiscal expenditure right now. It is a crisis. It is not normal times. And also, if you're worried about fiscal deficit, at a time like this, there won't be any private expenditure. You can't expect it. So you need to go for government expenditure to increase the GDP. And then if you're not spending as much as you should, you're inevitably staring at a lower GDP, which leads to a higher fiscal deficit. So you are reinforcing your same problem without doing what you should do right now.
Even cash transfers would not have led to an immediate release of demand, right? Because we've seen in the US where they came out with a historic $3 trillion package, wherein they gave $1,200 to each household, and we saw savings rate jump from below 10% to above 30%, indicating that cash transfers in an economic and health calamity like this might not go into discretionary expenditure. But the whole argument for cash transfers should not rest on economics at all. It should rest on, as someone pointed out, on the kind of social crisis that's going on. You need people to be able to weather this crisis so that the economy can be revived later on.
Another thing that the finance minister said was to extend the moratorium period, right? But a lot of people are also worried that when they have to eventually pay that money, they have to pay a huge lump sum amount. It will get accumulated over time, and it's a worry that a lot of middle class, upper middle class people also have. Do you think banks are just working on this like an eyewash? It's not really that they're helping the situation, but the entire thing is just saying that, look, we are giving you moratorium, you can pay it later. But at the end of the day, you have to pay the entire amount and you have to pay it together.
So the moratorium addresses the problem of the accumulated interest problem, right? You'd have to pay all the accumulated interest in one go. So what they've offered is to convert that into a term loan so that you're essentially paying interest on interest. So that worsens the problem. Second, the whole moratorium thing sort of pushes the problem into the future, but does not resolve it.
Yeah. Vrinda, what do you think, would have been a better way for the banks to nurture the return of demand into the system?
I don't think moratorium in and of itself is a bad thing. I mean, currently when the businesses are not working, you do need some sort of relief that you don't have to repay your loan right now, and the possibility of you to give it up in the future, that I don't think moratorium in and of itself is that bad. Of course, the problem of repaying it later is something to be looked at, but it does provide a current relief to the people who have to give high levels of repayment during the months of these crises. But I do think that credit can't, no matter how you give it, no matter what you do, no matter how much you restructure your loans, is not something that will provide relief. I mean, it's a very economic concept to think that, you get credit and you spend and, you have a multiplier effect. But right now, nobody is in a condition to think about taking loans also. Because if you have a huge repayment backed up right after the economy restarts, you don't want to take up more loans, which is why everybody is stressing that you need to have demand generated from cash transfers only. I mean, the most neoliberal countries like UK and US have done it, even though it leads up to saving. But that's that's a very country-specific example. You can't really juxtapose it here and say that this is exactly how it will happen here. Because in India, it's a much poorer country. You need to have much more expenditure happening right now. So which is why I feel banking system, because it's gone through its own recent crisis, huge crisis, it can't be the solution that we are looking for. It has to come from somewhere else.
As Vrinda pointed out, that moratoriums in themselves are not bad, but what's true is that they could lead to a worse problem in the future, wherein when these loans do turn bad, when some loans do turn bad, the private and public sector banks alike might turn to the cash-strapped government again for recapitalization or something like that. And so really, moratorium has to be moratoriums, even if they were to be helpful, would have to be accompanied with more direct ways of providing relief.
Yeah. Soham, what do you think the banks can do at this point? What, not just moratoriums, I'm talking about any relief or any way the banks can help or the banking sector can help the middle class to revive or to recover from this crisis that we are in?
One first thing is that banks can actually now can get rid of the red tapeism that Siddharth was telling. It's the best time and possibly the most important time when the poorer sections can access formal credit, mostly, more importantly in rural India. And I mean, any provision of formal credit with low interest rates from nationalized, centralized banks now be introduced, and irrespective of the whatever the guarantees that there will be paid back or something, because now I think we cannot expect the economy through cash, I mean through bank loans to revive through that. I mean the larger role of it, but what banks rather can do, and what has not been done for long, that the access to institutional credit to the poorest section of this country, more specifically in rural India, has always been a problem. And right now banks can rather, like what we are saying, ease of doing business. So let's make it ease of doing business for the poorest section, and bank can take over that space more specifically for rural India, rather than providing economy a boost over all across this.
If you want to be part of the discussion, you can reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Subscribe to our channel to listen to the most sensible voices from colleges and universities across the country.